Hello everyone, I'm Laureate Professor Marilyn Fleer from Monash University, Australia, and I believe this is your anniversary, so happy birthday for today and for the duration of the conference. It's so exciting. Thank you for the great honour to be invited to present to you today. I'm going to now go on to share my screen and begin the presentation. So let's begin. So this is the overview of what I'll be sharing today, and my goal is to tell you a little bit about the Conceptual PlayLab. That's the space in which I'm working in Australia. Show you an example of an intervention that we've been working on, and in the context of the snapshot of the research that we've been doing. So just one part of what we've been doing. So I hope that will inspire you, and I look forward to hearing more from you. Perhaps at the end of the conference, you could perhaps email me, marilyn.fleer@monash.edu. Love to hear from you. But also, if you're interested, we have lots of resources on our website that you can download, videos and various other working papers, etc. So you could follow along with us because we regularly update. So, well, let's begin. That's a little bit of background to me and the Conceptual PlayLab. But I'd like to share with you a little bit about the research. And our research has been funded by the Australian Research Council, which is our most prestigious funding body in Australia. And our goal is to set up a programmatic a study of conceptual play in science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And we have three pillars of research. One is focused on following infants as they become toddlers, as they turn into preschoolers and go into school, in relation to how they develop their conceptual understandings of STEM. We have our second pillar of research, which focuses very much on a similar thing, except it's very much oriented to families and the kinds of family conditions and pedagogies that are developed in diverse family settings, and how they bring STEM concepts and motivate children to learn STEM concepts for the present and the future. And the third area is where we're rolling out an evidence-based model of the intentional teaching of STEM for play-based settings. And that pillar of research is going to be what I'm going to be talking about in this presentation. To operationalise this a little bit more, you'll see that we're following 150 infants in Pillar 1. In Pillar 2, we're looking at 100 families, but we'll probably have quite a lot more because we're now working with organisations such as Playgroup and Royal Botanical Gardens, where there are larger numbers of families who visit. So this is a base. And Pillar 3, we're reaching out to 3,000 teachers, and some of the work that we've done that feeds into this, it will be the focus of where I'm going to take you now. So part of what we have done in the past in Pillar 3 that's fed into our big model that we're taking forward, has drawn on as our main methodology what's called an educational experiment. And this model or method has been theorised methodologically from a Vygotskian perspective, so definitely cultural historical concepts, and but primarily Marianne Hedegaard's work on a educational experiment captures the idea that educators and researchers, so teachers and researchers, work together on a theoretical problem, not just a problem of practice. So this is where it's a little different to perhaps action research, which might be oriented to a problem of practice primarily. This is also about a theoretical problem, and the theoretical problem that we were trying to solve together in our collaboration between researchers and teachers was actually how to bring concepts, STEM concepts, into children's play, into a play-based program, when the leading activity for the preschool child is to want to play. And in Australia, we've been charged with bringing more conceptual learning into into preschool. So we are seeking to preserve the quality of the leading activity of the preschool child to play as a psychological function of imaginary play, and also as an esteemed pedagogical practice that has a long history in early childhood or kindergarten education. So to take this one step further, one of the things that we have also that is also involved in a conceptual, educational experiment is that there is some kind of intervention that's planned, and the problems that are being solved are planned in relation to this innovation. And so we've drawn very heavily on Gunilla Lindqvist's 1995 work of a play world as the starting point, because she also spoke about and mentioned Marianne Hedegaard's work in relation to an educational experiment. And she's also draws on Vygotsky's conception of play, where there is the creation of imaginary situation. And in the imaginary situation, children change the meaning of the objects they see and give them new meaning, which affords new actions for the players. So this is very much the definition that we have used as well in following Gunilla's original work, but adding to this by exploring, well, how do we bring in STEM concepts so that the play is maintained and still matured, whilst at the same time children are learning, as is a requirement in our Australian context. So, how do we take this forward? Well, one of the things I'm going to be discussing here now is very much about how the dramatic and emotionally charged play acts as a source of children's development. And this is because we have developed this model, the conceptual play world model, where we are very interested to see how this brings forward children's development. And a conceptual play world model, building on Gunilla Lindqvist's work, mirrors the first part of what she designed, which was choosing a story or a book of some kind, which has drama in it. It's very engaging, emotionally charged for children in some way, and then creating an imaginary situation where all the children and the teachers go into this collective imaginary play where they role play the story, they introduce things that have happened and they take it forward. Where we've added to this is that we've explored the idea of introducing a problem that might arise in the story, such as the story of Rosie's walk, the little hen that is followed by a fox around the yard. And in that story, a problem can obviously arise where we see that the fox is trying to catch Rosie. But to take it one step further, to introduce some prepositional language of under, below, around, etc., and to take it a bit forward into STEM, we set up the imaginary playground or yard, which then is the place where we reenact the story, but we add to that so that, and in the example that I'm sharing, the children and the teachers come back into their classroom and they hear on the mobile phone a message from Rosie the hen's cousin wanting to visit but is lost and needs a map to help find, I'm lost and I can't find Rosie's farm, can you help me? So the children then, of course, can use Google Earth to look at exactly where their space is, at their imaginary space. They can start to plan maps and add to the story. So they can take the maps in, and Rosie's cousins can actually follow the map and be part of the imaginary situation. So that's a very quick example of the way in which we've taken it forward. So in that case, it's the map making that's been added to the drama of the story. And of course, prepositional language is important for that. So it amplifies what's already in the book, but it takes it forward in a really beautiful way because the children need the STEM concepts to further the play. So in that example, of an educational experiment, the one that I'm going to now share with you is the story of Alice in Wonderland. So, and this was the book that was chosen by the teachers in the study that I'm going to share with you. And in that story of Alice in Wonderland, we had 18 children and 2 educators. And in that beautiful story, the STEM concepts that were really being explored were very much in relation to the idea of the microscopic world. So going down, so shrinking to go down the rabbit hole. So Alice, of course, in the story shrinks and grows and shrinks and grows, as we know. And so this sets up a beautiful problem about following the Alice down the rabbit hole and exploring the whole idea of what happens if you get smaller and smaller and smaller. And in this case, the children and the teachers looked at microbes in particular. So they were very interested in becoming so small that they'd be able to see microbes in the soil. And as you can see here in this particular study, we generated a lot of digital photographs of what was going on, many hours of digital video recordings, and also teacher, researcher, professional conversations and development that we had as part of our educational experiment. So the findings, one of the things, so this is in this very short presentation, I won't be able to go into all of the findings, but I want to illustrate a couple that I think are very interesting. So I'm going to present, first of all, from the perspective of the play world, the conceptual play world, in which and what activities the children were involved in that were when the teacher organised the conceptual play world. And then I'm going to share with you what happened when the children initiated their own conceptual play world. So the first one is around the problems arise in the play world that need to be solved. And so I've already mentioned the microbe, which the Wonderland, which eventually became called Microbe Land. And this initiated all sorts of adventures that the children had. And so let's have a look at some of the initial, I'm going to share with you a little vignette, video clip of the initial part. And this is where the teachers, and this is one of our researchers who participated in this as well, and our 2 teachers who, and some of the children in the group here. And what we're seeing in this very first example is that the sort of normal, what you'd expect, everyday scenario of group time and hearing a story. And in this case, Olivia is telling the story, and she's talking about going down the rabbit hole and trying to get out of the rabbit hole. And then I'm going to show you the next part. But in case the video is not so clear through this Zoom recording, the teacher role plays, I want to go through the door. And one of the children you'll hear later in the clip, because it's a clip of just under a minute, the child says she dreamed she went through the keyhole. And teacher, that's a very good idea, but that would have to be a very small keyhole. She would even need to be smaller, obviously, than the story. So the children are actually adding to the story already. She would need to shrink even more. So let's have a listen to and watch the interaction. So the children here are making the comments. The teacher 2 is Ruth is supporting her, and teacher 1, Olivia, is sharing the story.
She tried to climb up. Can you try to climb up? Oh, slipping down. Oh, it's no use. I can't get that key. Goodness me, so silly. And then she thought, no, don't cry, Alice. Be brave. Don't be silly. Get yourself together. Come on. So she did. And she thought, what should I do? I really want to get through that door. thing.
He went through the keyhole.
And somehow,
Great idea.
But that would be a very small keyhole, so she would even need to be even smaller.
Need to shrink even.
so somehow.
So that's just given us a little taste of the scene. And now what we're going to do is look at the next part where the teacher too is being the table, and the children are actually role playing a part of it. And some of the children here either as audience, listening and viewing, or they're also participating, which is out of camera. So it gives you a little sense of, and what I'd like you to do is have a look at the sheer joy of this child, that the teachers are in role being play partners.
It's the table, but I'm so slippery, aren't I? Slippery table. No, you can't, because I've grown. And then how does Alice feel?
So now we'll have a look at my interpretations here in relation to these two video clips. So one of the things, and of course there were many more, but this is just to give you a flavour of it all. So the first interpretation, the children experience the drama of the story and they live the emotions of the characters through the actions. And we could really see that. So the children were in many respects in a scene that was supposed to be sad, but they were clearly very happy. So it's this beautiful contradiction between feeling happy in the play, but sad in the story plot. The other part that was an interesting contradiction too was the dynamic of shrinking and growing in the role play of acting as if they're Alice and as if they are a table. And the everyday concept of magnification becomes very meaningful for them, as becomes like a motive to want to explore the science of magnification, which later on the teachers do, but do introduce to them in by giving them more tools and setting up experiments where they're looking at what's in the mouldy bread that they've done some time-lapse photography on, what's in the compost bin and so on. So they're starting to study all sorts of microbial action that are in their everyday lives. And this is all in keeping with this idea that that the everydayness and in the everyday concepts can be introduced. But first of all, they have to be very personally meaningful, and we can see that the story is creating the drama and the excitement to go forward, and the pleasure of this occurring. But key to this is how the drama creates these dual emotional responses, and according to Vygotsky, gives an opportunity for children's development, because it brings out, it's like the dynamic force of orienting the children to the excitement, as you'll see soon, in relation to magnification or in relation to the problem that's arising. And that goes a lot further. The second interpretation that's related to this is this contradiction about being small in an adult world, but actually being huge in Wonderland. And the story creates this kind of paradox for them to experience, and that also gave very motivating conditions for the children. And through this, there's a consciousness of actions of the children, because it's really supporting this everyday concept of shrinking, which is laying the foundation for the learning of the scientific concept of magnification. And Vygotsky spoke very much about the importance of both these things happening. So the concepts being available to the children in their environment, but at the same time, their everyday situations, that a need to learn a concept needs to arise for them to want to access what might be there and available to them around magnification. And at the everyday conceptual level, as shown through the imagining the tall table, whilst also imagining being small. And then, of course, how that had to be flipped, because the children had to grow tall again to get the key, then become short again, shrink, to unlock the doors. So there was this constant playing around with being tiny and being and being large. And so this is really quite interesting. So at the scientific level, the drama of the story gives those motivating conditions. And I think, and you can see here some of the things that the children were doing, because the Wonderland, Alice in Wonderland, and therefore Wonderland became Microbe Land over time. So the story was really important, going down the rabbit hole and following the white rabbit, changed in the play world about learning about magnification and following the rabbit into microbe land, where they imagine the microbial action they've seen when they're using the digital microscopes. So there is this constant resourcing of the play through things that they are experiencing. But knowing how this educational experiment of the play world, and it's this dramatic and paradoxical imaginary situations, actually supports children's own play, we have to turn to an analysis of child-initiated play. So we were really interested to look at how children, when props were left in the environment during what's called, in the Australian context, a free play program. So that is where, or free choice program, where children can choose what they'd like to do indoors and outdoors in many programs, and teachers are distributed across those areas. So when the props are left, and the props were left here in the outdoor area, we see, and I've made this a little faster to begin with, but I want you to have a look at how the children take the props, and one child leads this and becomes role plays being the teacher. So she sets up her own, and together they set up their own imaginary play world of the adventures of Alice in Wonderland. So let's have a look at this happening.
Who wants to be the kid? Me. Okay. And we have to be the kids. I'll be the teacher. And I'll be the mad teacher. Stop. I want to be do you want to be a kid? Yep. I don't want to be a kid. I don't want to be a kid. No, I don't. You two have to. So you are. Do you want to be teachers?
So let's have a look at my interpretation of this. And so in this example, it's possible to see how the content of the child-initiated play actually comes from the adventures of Alice in Wonderland. So the book, the gloves, and so on are all very important for role-playing, being the teacher, setting up the story. And this, of course, aligns with both Elkonen and Vygotsky, who argue that the content of children's play comes from everyday life. But in this study, it's extended further by showing how preschools can also create content that can be realised in child-initiated play. And this also can be seen in how the children changed the problem that the teachers had planned, which was following the white rabbit following Alice down the rabbit hole, and then engaging in the story of Alice in Wonderland. What the children did was actually turn this into because the play worlds continued and the children went looking for the white rabbit. So their problem was actually looking for the white rabbit, and they came up with their own solutions. And we can see, because the teachers also talked about mapping and various other things, but you'll see in this example of the video here that this particular child talks about looking for the white rabbit and uses map making as the solution to enrich the play. And you'll see that you'll hear in the background the children are all calling out about white rabbits. So the focus is not about Alice, the focus is very much about the white rabbit. So let's have a look at this quick example.
That
can lead us to the white rabbit, can it?
Yes.
What might we see along the way?
Here.
What might we see along the way?
Microbes and rabbits.
Microbes and shrunken rabbits.
I'm leading the way because I have this map.
Well, the map's a good idea, isn't it? You lead the way.
It is a great one.
Have a look at this.
Now let me see.
So now we'll have a look at my interpretation of this. And what I found absolutely delightful in this is how the problem, so when we take the problem, which was initially initiated by the teachers, turns into the problem that's set up by the children. So looking for the white rabbit. And if we'd had time, we would have looked at some more examples of this where concepts in the children's play appeared to be emerging, but only at an everyday level. So let's have a look at this now in conclusion. So what we learned from our educational experiment was that the Alice in Wonderland, with the drama, the children's drama of looking for the white rabbit, created these motivating conditions for the collective play, because they were all playing together with the narrative of the everyday problem of following or finding the white rabbit. And even though this appeared in both teacher-led and child-initiated play worlds, it was still nevertheless something very interesting to see how children can make conceptual play worlds their own. And this is fitting in with the idea of child-initiated play, and in relation to the zone of proximal development that Vygotsky talks about, where was creating both the real form of development and the ideal form of development that were both active in the imaginary play. And this was seen in three ways. So first, we found that it was developing the play. So the conceptual play world as something that was planned by the teachers, and then children would go into these imaginary play worlds, that it really did support the development of the children's play. And we found that that children were acting as if they were children and teachers in that example, because it's very interesting, because in the same way that Vygotsky speaks about how two sisters who in reality are sisters have to role play being sisters, therefore know how to behave like a sister and what are the rules for being a sister. We found that in the children acting out the roles and rules of the conceptual play world, what we noticed was that first of all, they played out this situation of what the teacher's role was, to read the story and then later on tell the story, and the children's role to be participants in it. But then what we found was that the children took over and created their own problems that they took forward. So this was very important, because the collective play in the play world acted as a kind of precondition for consciously realizing the new roles and rules associated with the play world, where curriculum concepts were being introduced. Although at an everyday level, the children were experiencing these. And the second conclusion was that how the STEM learning was being amplified in the play, which was the theoretical problem of our educational experiment. And we know from previous research that in play worlds, the adults take a more active role in children's play, creating a zone of proximal development for them. So we know that that happens, and that the problem of following the white rabbit in the play world of Alice in Wonderland became the problem of finding the white rabbit. So from following to finding in the child-initiated play. But the children on their own, this is the thing we noted, was that the children on their own could not bring out the concept of magnification in the child-initiated play practices. They weren't role-playing that part of the conceptual play world. The mapping was the closest that they got to in terms of being able to take forward, create a model of the imaginary situation of trying to find the white rabbit. And this was very much, so we can argue that the conceptual play world did provide the capacity to have the role play, and did have the capacity to take forward some of the everyday conceptions, but it just did not allow the children in their child-initiated play to actually make use of that. So it suggests then that the precondition of collective imaginary play of Wonderland and the collective orientation to the problem of shrinking needs adults to introduce this and the curriculum concept of magnification in order to help solve the problem in children's play. So what we noticed from our interviews with teachers and looking at the data is the teachers said that the children's play was often stalled in the sense that they couldn't take it a step further. But when the teachers were there, they could, in many respects, fill the gap, if you like, to support the children to play more in have more complex play. So then this takes us to the third and final finding of the conclusion. As part of our conclusion, we suggest then that in this cultural historical theorisation, STEM learning and play development take place. So the play world creates developmental conditions for children, because the collective play of the children and teachers also appears to be a precondition to orienting children towards a shared problem of looking for the white rabbit. And I think this is really nice because the book gives the narrative, the children initiate and make their own the kind of problem that arises that needs STEM solutions. But it's obviously when the children are on their own in the child-initiated play, it stays at the everyday level. So having the play world actually, in many respects, floats the scientific concepts and has them available to the children in a supported way. And so we think this is really important for later learning of particular concepts. So the narrative of shrinking to go down the rabbit hole can be the science becomes more personal and meaningful, because to understand what's going on in relation to a microscopic world, then having those additional experiences is important. And theoretically, it can be argued that in a play world, there was always a contradiction between the fiction of the play plot, following the white rabbit, and the reality of the players, imagining shrinking to fit down the rabbit hole. And is this contradiction in the collective problem of the play world that is thought to act as a stimulating motive for children to learn concepts to support their play, i.e. imagining magnification. So we feel that the conceptual play world is a model with choosing a story that's dramatic, creating an imaginary situation that the children and the teachers all go on these adventures together into this imaginary play world, and then meeting problems that need STEM solutions actually gives the conditions in that drama for children to really want to engage in STEM concept formation. And we think this is really a nice way to support the development of children's play at the same time as bringing in STEM concepts into children's play, which is a much more engaging and productive, we believe, scenario than making kindergartens and preschools more cognitively oriented, as more of to look more like schools, so to be more formal and academic, and concepts to be learned in more of a disembedded way. And we think that the conceptual play world, because of the fun, the joy of it, as you saw in the first examples, gives the children and the teachers this beautiful, engaging space to be together. So there is a sense of being together, all exploring and playing together. Now, of course, this wasn't occurring all the time. This was when they went into play worlds. But our research has shown us that what also happens is that the act of going into the play world, so going down the rabbit hole, for instance, when there is a consistent way in which that happens, so having a tunnel that they all crawl through, or that certain actions as though they're all going in, or they're trying to climb up a table. When those sort of patterns emerge, what we've learned is that this patterning also happens when the children decide they want to go into the conceptual play world. They'll start to say, here's the rabbit hole, and all the other children suddenly come together and go into the rabbit hole. It's a really engaging and exciting way for children to learn STEM concepts, and the children's excitement motivates the teachers to enjoy this experience as well. So thank you for your attention, and I hope the rest of your conference goes really well, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, and I'll just stop sharing and say goodbye.